At the end of December, I decided to stop doing monthly wrap-ups on my channel, and that's because I wanted a way of giving equal attention to all of the books that I read, and I found that doing monthly wrap-ups, it kind of changed every month how much I could talk about a book. And I started to see other booktubers doing this where they'll do a wrap-up after every 3 books that they read or after every 5 books, and I thought it was a really good way of doing it, so here we are. Now you might be thinking, Abby, December was 6 months ago. It is now July and you have yet to do 1 to 3. That's because I kind of dropped the ball on this channel, and it's also because I haven't actually done that much reading this year. I don't want to call it a slump because then it feels really negative and I feel like I've failed, and I don't like to feel like I've failed, so I was just honestly more interested in doing other things like watching TV and watching films, which is why you've seen a lot more of that on my channel so far. The good thing about me not having read as many books this year is that I can get through the ones that I have read a little bit more quickly, so there isn't going to be a massive backlog of things for me to get through to get to the things that I'm currently reading. I shall now get to actually reviewing. The first book that I read this year was all the way back in January, and I read it in preparation to go and see the film, and that is Room by Emma Donoghue. Room is the story of a 5-year-old boy who is being held captive in a very small room with his mother. He's grown up in this room, so he has no frame of reference for the outside world. He doesn't even think it exists. And that means that everything that's in the room is his normal, and everything that does exist outside he believes only exists in the TV. It's really hard to review this book because the second half of the story is what really makes it, but I don't want to talk about it because I really feel like you should go into this book not knowing what happens. I think it ruins the tension of reading it, and I was really surprised that the trailer for the film actually shows a lot of what happens in the second half of the book. What this book does really well, and I think the film does this fantastically as well, is that it really shows how intimate the room is because it's so small, and obviously there's the mother and there's Jack living in there, and then every now and again they're visited by old Nick, who is their captor. And although from the outside looking at this situation we would think this is absolutely appalling, there's no way a child could be brought up in that room, Jack doesn't know that, and this is his life and this is his normality. And I think it does a really good job of showing how he has quite a positive connection with this room because that is his home, that's all he knows, that's his entire world is in that room. And it's heartbreaking because you've got this duality of this child not knowing any better, and then you have the mother who was obviously being abducted when she was younger, and she's lived outside the room and she knows exactly what's out there, but she can't tell her son that because it would obviously be very upsetting. I think if this book had been written in the point of view of the mum, it wouldn't have worked as well, because writing through the point of view of Jack allows Emma Donoghue to explore both sides of it. It would be really hard for us to understand how Jack feels about the room if we weren't inside his head, but it's easy for us to understand what the mother is probably going through because we do live in the outside world, and we can kind of guess and we can see through the way that she interacts with Jack how she's coping inside the room compared to him. I think one of the biggest themes in the book is probably violation. It's something that's brought up all the way through the book, and it's shown in so many different ways. Now, while I can't imagine this book being written from any other point of view other than Jack's, I did have a few problems with his voice at times because, like a child, he is very full of beans at times, and he also gets frustrated and he gets angry. That's obviously really true to life, but at the same time sometimes I got a little bit tired of reading from that point of view, and you feel yourself getting frustrated with him, which is probably a good point because you're kind of getting to see where the mum's coming from in those situations. But I don't know, there were just times when I needed to put the book down because that child was just draining my energy. So in the end I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The second book I read this year, which again was all the way back in January or February, is All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. With this one, I'm going to read out the blurb from the back because, as you'll see in a minute, I'm going to have a pretty hard time describing this book. Patricia is a witch who can communicate with animals. Lawrence is a mad scientist and inventor of the 2-second time machine. As teenagers, they gravitate towards one another, sharing in the horrors of growing up weird, but their lives take different paths. When they meet again as adults, Lawrence is an engineering genius trying to save the world and live up to his reputation in near-future San Francisco. Meanwhile, Patricia is a graduate of Eltisley Maze, the hidden academy for the magically gifted, working hard to prove herself to her fellow magicians and secretly repair the Earth's ever-growing ailments. So this book is like a fusion between magic and science. And the first thing that I wrote about it was that it is uniquely written. You'll be reading a perfectly normal sentence and suddenly it'll just take a turn in a direction you never would have guessed it would have gone. And that's one of the things that I really liked about it. I think it could only do that because it had a sort of dry humour. And I think without that, a lot of the things that happen in this book wouldn't be as believable. It does a really good job of suspending your disbelief. I've seen a lot of people call this book genre-defying, and I totally agree with that. It's really hard to place it because it's got fantasy, it's got sci-fi, it feels like a contemporary, and it feels almost like magical realism, but not quite. I sat down and tried to come up with a way to explain the genre, and the only thing that I could come up with was mundane fantasy, because I feel like this is what life would be like if magic really existed. Usually in a book or a film, if someone finds out that they're a witch or a wizard or they have some sort of special ability, it means that they're the chosen one, it means that they have a purpose in life. But with Patricia, that's not really the case, and that's true to life because there's no magical older witch or wizard that can tell you, okay, here's your quest, this is what you were born to do, go and do it. You've just got to figure it all out for yourself. And that's what Patricia and Lawrence have to do, even though they are witches and genius scientists. Speaking of the characters, both of them are quite flawed, but they're also likeable in their own way. So they felt very real in that sense. In the end it becomes quite large scale, and I think I would have preferred if it just stayed on the small scale with these two characters as the focus. One more thing I'll say about this book is that I picked it up at a time when I was feeling quite down because I wanted a book that was going to make me feel happy, and I saw this one and it seemed quite different. It says that it's warm, funny and sardonic, and yeah, I think it was the perfect tone to read at that time because it wasn't completely like happy, but it did have those warm moments. It also maintained that kind of like sardonic tone throughout, so yes. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I'm going to talk to you about in this video is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I also read this one way back in January, February, March I think, so I tried my best to write down everything that I remember about it. Unlike the last one, this has a definite genre, and that is sci-fi. It's about a misfit crew of wormhole builders on board the ship The Wayfarer, and they get assigned a massive job. Like the last book I talked about, honestly, this one isn't really about the plot either, it's much more to do with the characters. If you're anything like me, you'll be drawn to this kind of thing where there's a misfit group of people that become a little family unit, and that's really the strength of this book. So first of all, we're introduced to Rosemary, who serves as kind of our eyes into this ship and how it works. She's been employed as a clerk, but there's something mysterious that she's holding back from telling anyone, including the reader. So as you're reading it, you're trying to figure out where she's come from, what she's done, why she's decided to take this path, because it's an unusual path for someone like her. And through her we get to meet the rest of the crew. Half the crew are made up of aliens and half of the crew are made up of humans. And the thing that I most enjoyed about this book was reading about all the different cultures. Each of the different cultures is so unique and they all have their own social norms that Rosemary has to learn. Like for example, in Sissex's culture, it's very touchy-feely and that's seen as completely normal, but obviously Sissix understands that that's not normal for human beings, so she reins it in. And it's just really interesting to see a group of people who've all come from different backgrounds learn how to live together and learn how to respect each other's cultures and what is normal for them, and ultimately find a way to coexist. Although coexist isn't really the right word because this crew is pretty much a family. That's another thing I really liked about this book because it explores lots of different kinds of relationships. You've got friendships, they all obviously work together, so they're colleagues, and you've got romantic relationships as well. And as well as that, it also explores heterosexual and homosexual relationships. This is the kind of sci-fi that I love. It's the kind of sci-fi that you find in Star Trek, where it's about people who've overcome their differences and have learned how to get along together. It's a very positive and feel-good look at the future. Another thing I enjoyed about this book was seeing how different communities live in space. So you've got the people on the Wayfarer. I liked learning about the process of how they build the wormholes. I also liked learning how they live on the ship and the food and all of that kind of stuff. So I really only had two problems with this book. The first one being there was one character that got kind of annoying at times, and I feel really bad about saying it because she's such a lovely character and I know that I'm supposed to like her, but honestly she just grated on me a little bit sometimes. She's one of those very over-the-top, quirky type of characters, and sometimes that was just a little bit too much. But honestly, that's just a personal thing. That's just me not liking a perfectly likable character, so the problem is probably me. My other problem, like I said, was the plot, because I don't really remember being that interested in seeing what was going to happen. I was just happy reading about their lives in space, and the plot just became something that made it a book rather than just a random bunch of characters with no purpose. Because, you know, if there wasn't a plot, then I would be sitting here complaining like, well, it was just a book about people living in space and I wanted to see a plot. If you're looking for a book that's going to lift your spirits and make you feel quite positive about the world and the future and where we're heading, I would pick this one up. In the end, I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Those are my first 3 books that I am going to review this year. I think I've read 9 books in total overall, so you can expect another wrap up like this very soon. Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye!